I'll just stop sharing for the minute to just do a wee introduction and say hello to everybody in the room, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. This is the latest in our Artist Talk series that we've been doing online. So this is part of our GoMA at Home programme. I'm not sure how many people know of this, but we've been working at home through our blog or the lovely platform of WebEx for the last wee while to do curatorial talks and artist talks since the beginning of the year, because GoMA is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, so it's given us an extra impetus to think back and look back and have various conversations both about the history of it, but also contemporary too. And this particular talk is supported by the Art Fund, who have very generously supported us for work in these precarious times that we are going to be able to reveal more of as we get back into the building properly. It is open if you want to go and visit, and the lovely space behind me. I'm not there, I'm afraid. I would absolutely love to be, but I'm in my back room with a picture. But Domestic Bliss behind me is open at the moment. So I'm Katie Bruce, and I'm producer curator at GoMA, along with my curatorial colleagues, Martin Craig and Angela Masafra, who are both in the room today, and they're going to be posting links into the chat that might come up so that you can click and get further information, or they might be monitoring any questions. So if, as Jackie and I are talking, if you want to put any questions, please put them in the chat, or you can save them to the end and raise your hands and we'll do the unmuting and conversation thing as we kind of go. We're recording this. I understand people might not want to be on it. The plan is to put the talk up in our blog at the end, and we'll put more of the conversation and not necessarily between me and Jackie, and not necessarily the questions, so that if it means that people can have more confidence about asking things, and we won't put that up there. And yeah, thank you, Jackie, for joining us. I'd like to welcome you to this talk. Jackie, I've known for a few years now. We met through artists Rachel Mimietz and Anne Elliott, and Jackie actually took part in a project in 2004 called Elbow Room that Rachel and Anne were doing. But she is an award-winning artist. The latest that I know of, anyway, there's probably more in there, was the Freelands Award in 2016. And she's also a Glasgow School of Art graduate, which I'm sure we'll cover at one point today. She lives and works in Glasgow, although she's travelled widely for her work and has forged an international reputation for a socially engaged practice that often looks at care, identity, and public space and how that informs our identities. Her practice includes sculpture, installations, photographs, films, drawings, and performance. And I suppose particularly that was for interest for us at GoMA, it is research-based, it's collaborative, and it's participatory. She's had solo exhibitions and commissions in Glasgow and Edinburgh and wider afield in the UK, in addition to public commissions in Oslo and Melbourne. Following her 2016 solo show in GoMA, 5 of her works came into Glasgow Museum's collection, and you can just, if you can see me in a tiny little bit in the corner, you can see the print Studio 1995-2016, which is currently on display in Domestic Bliss. So we're going to have a conversation today. Hopefully it'll start to flow through the digital media once we get there. And we met to pull together some slides, both of GoMA and opening, but also of Jackie's early 1990s work, as well as the show in GoMA. So I'm going to start the presentation now with some slides from 1990 and the British Art Show, which came to Glasgow for the City of Culture, and the lack of Scottish voices in that particular British Art Show, and the kind of work also shown there prompted the then head of Glasgow Museums, Julian Spalding, to create his own show in response. And a number of the artists in this show were then included in acquisitions for the idea of a gallery of modern art opening up in the center of the city. So I will just do my digital thing. Keynote. Can everybody see that okay? Okay. So the first slide is from the British Art Show and shows Brian Jenkins' work in the McClellan Galleries. And next to that is the Glasgow's Great British Art Exhibition, which Julian Spalding. Can you see these, Jackie? I can see.
Yeah, but I've got it on my phone, but I've also got the version you sent me on my laptop, which is a bit bigger. So if I look off to the side, it's because I'm looking at my laptop. I'm also just terrified that my phone is going to die because the charging cable is. But we're good. Just keep going. I'll join
Okay,
in.
then. Oh, the joys of technology. It's definitely an informal talk anyway. So I think when Jackie and I were talking about this, did you visit either of these shows in the McClellan Gallery?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I remember them. I remember the British Art Show very clearly. I don't remember so much. I can't actually remember being in Glasgow's Great British Art Exhibition because we were so kind of raging about it. We felt really kind of excluded by, I mean, I was still at art school, so check out my arrogance that I felt excluded from the show. Because I think the British Art Show was the first time I had seen a lot of contemporary art in one place. It was very different to where like work that you saw in Kelvin Grove and things, but it was incredible because the galleries just looked. I think it was the first time I was in the McClellan Galleries that I really remember, and they were so fabulous, like just the most beautiful spaces. Talking about it yesterday made me quite down about the fact that they still exist in the city and they're not used. I mean, they're just so beautiful. So there was loads of great work in it, that work that I still remember that I think about, like the Mona Hatoum electric piece and that heated up, and Bethan Hughes' tiny little like photograph of a tiny little house made out of a piece of reed. And what I remember about it also was that because Andrew Nairn was one of the selectors and he was working at the Third Eye, and I kind of knew who he was from being in Third Eye Centre openings. And I hung around with slightly older people who had graduated art school. So artists like, I think Nathan was just finished, Nathan Coley. So they were all employed as kind of well-paid, educated guides. So I do remember very much being approached as soon as I went in by people I knew saying, would you like to talk about any of the work in the show? But I really remember it as being a fantastic art exhibition. I thought it was great. And then, of course, it was derided by the curators of our city art collection. So Julian Spalding hated it and then decided to do his own, like Glasgow's Great British Art Exhibition that I thought I hadn't seen. But in the conversations we were having the other day, the work that I really remember from that time that I thought I saw in GoMA was the Joe Spence photographs. So if you're correct and I'm not correct, Katie, that they were in that exhibition, yes, that's what I remember so much was that pairing. So maybe I did see it because I really remember the Joe Spence works, and I remember being really put off by the way that they were cited next to Beryl Cook, which just seemed like the whole antithesis of what Joe Spence was talking about and working with was this portrayal of human female bodies. I mean, I'd never seen a woman's body like the Joe Spence photograph because I hadn't seen really any naked women apart from myself. And like, you know, bits of magazines, but all glamorized. I'd never seen, you know, I was brought up in a very conservative household. I never saw my mum naked or anything. So it was quite a shocking image. So I must, if that wasn't in GoMA, then I would have seen it. There was another one of a woman of Joe Spence leaning forward wearing red stilettos that I really remember. Yes, the one on the left. Yes, so I really remember seeing that. It made quite an impact. So it can't all have been bad, but the show in general, our feeling was just kind of quite mortified that our city was making that big statement. So no, I do remember seeing it, and I remember very much 1990 when I was at art school, we got a lot of opportunities. The pubs were open very late. It was a really exciting year to be at art school. It was brilliant. So and the talk then was of beginning this collection, and it was all building up to they'd announced they were going to make the Gallery of Modern Art. So it was very exciting. But then there was quite a lot of statements coming from Julian Spalding that he didn't appreciate the work that was being made by artists in the city that were my peers, and that he didn't rate it and didn't think it was good enough to be in his museum. So that caused a lot of tension.
Yeah, because I think our experiences are the opposite. Because I was in Edinburgh at that time. I think I would have been in first or second year at art college, and I don't think I came through for the British Art Show. Sorry, scary admission on live and on video. But I think I came through for the Great British Art Show because I had the catalogue in there, and whether I came through to go with my parents or something, I really can't remember. Because I just really remember going to see the Hockney, and so yeah. And I think obviously, I mean, the conversations in Edinburgh would be different to those in Glasgow anyway, at that time. So yeah, and I think there were a number of artists in that Great British Art Show that Julian showed that did come in to the collection. So like Hockney, like Bruce MacLean, like Joe Spence, like Beryl Cook. As well. So I think the next slides are actually, we're skipping forward a few years.
Yeah, but that's what the talk's supposed to be about. It was just that
Yeah.
my connection to it started in 1990.
Yeah. So these are photographs from when GoMA opened. So looking quite different in some ways to the space, although as you can see from behind me and in there, the Ettore Sottsass work was in there for when GoMA opened.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, along with Bridget Riley. And at the time they were called, the galleries were named. So you're looking here at the Water Gallery on my left. I've no idea what that looks like to you. And then the Air Gallery, which is up at the top, which is now Gallery 4, where Domestic Bliss is in there. And if I go forward a little bit, yeah. So these are photographs from when the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh visited and were shown around and downstairs. So I don't think the basement had been finished properly. I mean, it looks like a warehouse that they're being led around. So the Bruce Lacey head is there. And I remember we were chatting about the
slap and
George
tickle
Wiley
machine. There was a George Wiley
The slap.
slap and tickle machine in the basement. I do remember that, which is a kind of really nice George Wiley whimsical work. But again, I found this sort of the pairing of works really difficult. I didn't, and the themed galleries I didn't rate at all. So yeah, I found all that quite difficult.
Thanks. And as well, so I was just going to, yeah, and yeah, you could see, so this was the studio where if in normal times we would have been up there having this talk just now, and actually the bit that's here, it's removed. They changed the stairwells just before I started. And so Adrian's standing in front of a piece that is no longer up in the studio there.
All right. Yeah, it's quite that space again. It's quite a difficult space. That is a very good picture of Bruce MacLean. It's really good. Who's that in the background? Is that Julian Spalding in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, he was very opinionated about what he wants to do, and when I finally met him, he seemed like a very nice man. I don't want this talk to be entirely about him, but I guess him and characters like Pat Lally had. Yeah, I saw Pat Lally's in the pictures with the Queen. So he was the Lord Provost at the time, and he was the vision behind the concert hall and the whole 1990 and Glasgow's Miles Better. So it had a huge impact on the city at the time. But I don't know, some of it I found quite difficult. Look at the Queen, isn't she lovely? And look at the Queen behind Julian Spalding. You see, it was all that kind of stuff that just I found really difficult. I found that really patronising as someone from a working class background who had gone to art school, because there was a whole lot of stuff in the newspapers, like there was reading, I don't know what that newspaper is there. That's not quite
It's the
coming up.
Sporting Life, so I presume
Oh.
that's a reference to the Queen and our horse racing that he's doing.
All right. It's just, it kind of felt a bit like, you know, there's art for us and there's art for all the working class people in Glasgow, because there was a lot written about making it more popular, getting people involved. It was, I'm sure there was this phrase about kind of art for taxi drivers, and it just used to really wind me up because my relatives were taxi drivers and we had perfectly educated conversations about a lot of things, but just because they didn't have fine art degrees or language to, you know, Kelvin Grove was always such a welcoming place that you could choose what you went to look at. You weren't told how to think when you went into Kelvin Grove. So like my dad loved that Rembrandt painting, Man in Armour. We would get marched up to see that every single time we went, and it was his job to tell us the merits of the Man in Armour and Rembrandt as a painter over the Dali, you know. So that was quite an incredible thing to have in your city, the opportunity for, like, you know, my dad, who spent most of my kind of adult life, from the time I was at art school, he was unemployed, to kind of have those conversations, you know. I just think that, and I think the problem I had with GoMA right from the start in that kind of variation of it was you were just always being told what to think, and it was, you couldn't be shown any art unless there was a joke nearby to lighten the mood. So you can't have Joe Spence without Beryl Cook, you can't have any sculpture without a big sculpture of the Queen, or the Elvis sculptures that came later, like they got bought at the art fair, I think. And I agree that they are, you know, I am absolutely a fan of Elvis, and then I agree that they're quite funny, but it was just, I found it quite patronising. And I found it quite patronising as a Glaswegian, and that was what annoyed me, because I had the chance, I think, by then to go to London and see big museums in London, and they were the shows, you know, that hallowed space was such a beautiful thing to go into. So I didn't really feel I wanted to go into something that was scaled down and kind of reduced in its content for me as a Glaswegian. So there you go. That was my feelings at the time. And I suppose we did feel quite excluded, because there'd been quite public statements about, you know, the type of work that our work wasn't didn't have the longevity. So by 96, I wasn't even in Glasgow, I was living in New York. So, when I did my show at Tramway in 1994, it was all, you know, there was that work and there was other work, and those two things didn't really cross over. So
yeah, sorry, I skipped past. So those
I'll put
of
up
the
the
artists.
picture. Put that up. That's a good one of who's all there. I noticed the only person I could recognise at the back, there's George Wiley's in it, but Ali Macaulay's creeping in at the back there from Tim the Species. And there's Thomas Joshua Cooper. See him. And Stephen Campbell. And who else is in it? It's a good picture.
Alan Davies there, and Adrian Wisniewski, Tatiana.
Oh, thingy at the front, John Bellamy. That's John Bellamy in the front row with the red shirt. Pretty sure that's John Bellamy. I
know we need to have a bit of a look through, and
yeah, it's good.
Matthias Kwage is there as well, and Håkon Tay as well. So yeah, it's kind of nice we document. We got sent some of these recently, but yeah, I skipped on to the next one. So yeah, well, because I think there was a post recently and we had a bit of a chat about it, and you went, I didn't get an invite to go, and then we realized that you were in New York. So
I know. I still didn't get an invite.
Okay, sorry.
We were so arrogant, but there you go. Yeah, I was running plastic bars on the roof of my studio building in New York. So yeah, so that's the roof of my studio when I was at Hunter College, which was fantastic, this big silver roof space. But I bet you could have a nice roof bar there now. But I was there like a couple of years ago, and the building is still there. But that area behind it, which I found it really frightening at first, but it's like Gotham City. It was like Gotham City because it's the back of Port Authority bus station, and it's really dirty and run down. But there's these big like runways of high up lengths of road that take you into the bus station and that come off the Hudson. So it was just, I loved all of that. But that now is where all the Hudson, that whole big Hudson Navy Yards, that huge big development, is it called the Shed? It's enormous. It's been totally transformed, and is now like the next hipster area of Manhattan. But yeah, that's what I was doing in 1996 not in Glasgow. So,
and I suppose I quite like this one because it just, with pubs reopening, or that idea of the beer garden suddenly coming out at the moment. But yeah, this is 25 years ago in terms of what you
yeah,
were doing.
yeah, I was very on the ball even then. So, but yeah, the timeline. Is the timeline the next picture?
Yeah, which is
Yeah,
going to be hard for anybody to see,
yeah, but you do
unfortunately.
not put a deep. Well, it's quite. I quite
Yeah.
like showing this drawing when we're talking about these kind of historic events, because I think it's always quite important for artists to contextualize themselves within a history of something else. So, because this was around the opening of GoMA and how I placed myself within it, I got the dates totally wrong about when GoMA opened, because I didn't realise it had opened after I had left to go to New York. I thought it happened when I was still here, because I was getting mixed up with the British Art Show and the Glasgow's Great Art Exhibition. So that often happens when you get old, I think. So when I was doing my show at the Fruit Market with the fantastic book that they published, I felt I had to draw. I decided to draw this big timeline that was started out. It was as one of my streetlight glimmer drawings that hadn't quite worked. So I turned it on its side and just started doing this drawing where above the line of the streetlight, see if you go back to the one before,
Yeah.
Katie, above the line of the streetlight was things that were happening in my life, and below the line underneath was things that was happening in my art life, if you know what I mean. So what you really noticed was this ebb and flow of an art career, which I guess is what I've had. And I thought I found it quite interesting, especially for, I suppose, like anyone that's had a child, male or female, actually. But there is this kind of ebb when you have to take time out, or when you move house, or you live somewhere abroad, and so you're not, the two things don't run in parallel. When you're busy below the line, you're certainly not busy above the line, and vice versa. And occasionally you're busy at both times, and occasionally you're not busy at all at either side. So then if you go back to the next one, there's you put that wee detail of that time, which is quite a nice way to look at what was going on round about that time. It's a historic document. So I was clearly running a lot of bars, and also did my show at Tramway. That was all just before. So we were really active then, like on the committee at Transmission, and really active in the city. And that was when also we did the show with Lubaina Hamid at Transmission, which I can't remember how that came about. That wasn't me in any shape or form that initiated that. I can't remember whether she wrote to us or proposed it. I really haven't got a memory of that. I would have to check back further. But it was really interesting for us to work with her, because she was a sort of very different generation artist.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna skip.
Are you going to put up the next picture of, there's Ross with his dreadlocks? So, and the top of the information board as you walked in did not get painted, because we didn't think, I never thought about the photos getting taken, and it is, every time I see that image it drives me up the wall. But for the Fruit Market book, Elizabeth McLean photoshopped in a little bit of powder blue, so I need to get that image to use. I know, I can't believe I hadn't ever done it before. So yeah, so that, I mean, I suppose you can see when you look at the density of work that was in GoMA when it opened in '96. A show like the one I did at Tramway is really not, there's not a lot of parallels there, because there's not much to see and touch, and it's not, I always felt Julian Spalding in Glasgow itself, it was this desire for work that had all its emotions written all over it. Unless the emotion was right there, you had to be, again, it's that thing of being told what to experience. If you want to be angry, you have to look at an angry painting, and if you want to be sad, you have to look at a sad painting, and if you want anything to do with anger, it has to be red, and anything to do with sadness has to be blue. It felt like it was all very kind of, you were being directed too much, and I suppose I bristled against that a bit. So
yeah, I mean, I suppose having read some of the past acquisition papers or strategies, what he talked about was that there needed to be a depth of feeling or emotion that was reachable through the work that was quite immediate and emotive. in a
Yeah,
different way. And I suppose that thing around about how, you know, like, I suppose, yeah, you're talking about work that is quite bombastic and quite there, and some other, you know, a lot of the work that we know and we've kind of brought in is a lot quieter in terms of its initial impact, but has
yeah,
layers of meaning, and you spend time with the work
yeah,
to explore that a lot more as well. And I mean, I suppose that's a little bit about the history that I don't know as much about the relationship between Tramway, which I'm presuming was part of the council at that
yeah,
time
yeah,
as
yeah,
well, and
yeah. But it,
Glasgow museums, but they've always kind of worked in separate departments or been separate. So
but it had a proper curatorial team, and that
yeah,
was when my show was when Charles Escher was the director there. So they had a director job, and by the time that happened, the director was the sort of visual art person, but performance was being programmed centrally. But initially, they had a big main director, and then they had a curator of art and a curator of performance, I think. Or maybe it was the main director's job to do performance, because the theatre was clearly like a huge part of it.
yeah,
And then the job morphed into becoming centrally programmed, so there was no one on site. And I knew Tramway really well because I'd worked there a lot as an usher, so like a gallery attendant over many shows. So by the time I did a show there, I was really familiar with the staff and with the setup, you know. But
mhm,
I thought it really lacked having a figurehead, because when Charles left, he wasn't replaced. So Katrina Brown was working there. She
yeah,
was his curator. I think he was the director and she was the curator. So it was so my show only happened because of the two of them being there. It wasn't so it was a very different programming stream to GoMA. It was
yeah.
done very differently. So that was where Christine's From Life show happened, and we were all through we that was all through Charles Escher's curation at that
Mhm.
point.
And I think,
So,
oh,
but
the next one's a review, isn't it?
yeah, but that was what I found it when I was looking through some archive stuff. But it's very nice because Lubina Himmett is listening to my speaker, which is what we noticed when I dug it out. So in the photograph,
Yeah,
she's, and I think that's Maud Salter next to her. And the woman on the right, I've forgotten her name, but she's a Glasgow artist. I just can't remember her name. Maybe someone else will be able to put that in the chat, or it's quite hard to see, I have to say. And the man with the beer bottle is my cousin Edward, who now lives in Paris. I just noticed. But Lubena, I think, would have been up installing her show in transmission or on a visit, because they were both 1994. So there you
yeah.
go.
So I think, yeah, the next one is
Yeah,
Lubena's show, which was there, and I mean, which was really interesting for us as well, because there was in taste, there's a policy that Julian had written where he mentions a commission with Lubena, which obviously never happened because we would have rewritten the histories of things that are in the collection at GoMA, and it would have been a lot more timely. But I suppose that's that thing around, you know, when I suppose the perception is there is a disconnect from GoMA to, say, Tramway or transmission or what was happening, but it's not quite as clear cut as that, really. And yeah, and apparently he went to Lubena's opening.
yeah. I think it was either the opening or while she was installing, but I think it was probably the opening. But that was such a brilliant lesson when that of us as young artists running transmission, because it taught me about networking. I always remember, because Lubena, we saw him coming in and we were all like giving out the beer from the office going, there's Julian Spalding just come in. But he came in, he's very confident, and came in and he was looking at the show, and Lubena came up to me and asked me to introduce her to him, because she knew who he was
Mhm.
too. And of course, she was hopeful that he would maybe buy some work, as were we. We thought he might buy something from the show. But it was just it was just that learning about that it was better for her to be introduced rather than her to just walk up and say, "Are you Julian Spalding?" So I found that quite a learning experience. It's always stayed with me that she was kind of, and her partner or friend, I can't remember, she had a friend with her, who was also kind of quite good at all that chat. So anyway, yeah, but he did come, didn't speak to us particularly. I just spoke to Lubina. And there you go. That's us. So Katie, I'm conscious of time, so I think
Yeah.
we're going to have to not be
Oh,
too
there's the bit from
reminiscent.
ours. Yeah, should we?
So there's this is nothing to do with the opening of GoMA, but I found it when we were looking through. So it's my postcard from Dan Graham, because we had a studio in Wasps, and he was visiting Glasgow. I can't even remember why, but he came, that somebody set up for him to do some studio visits. So he came up to my studio at Wasps, and the show at Tramway had already finished, but I had all the sound elements. It was 4 soundtracks that I played them on 4 Walkmans, sort of set up around my studio at Wasps, next door to Julie's and Tanya Layton's. And then I think we had to go and meet in the Tron with whoever was his studio he was going to next, and my mum came in. So I had this really bizarre experience of my mum with 2 bags of shopping coming into the Tron and introducing her to Dan Graham. So there you go. But anyway, that was a nice thing to find. I'd forgotten about it, and when it came to transmission, we were like, who's that letter from? So there you go. But that's not about GoMA.
Okay. This is though.
Yeah, but it's a nice tie, because that is exactly, he probably sat in that chair that's in the foreground, but that was the studio, the work that was in the print that was in my GoMA show recently was that photograph is taken of my studio wall, as I used to do that sometimes if you got a lot of stuff together, and I was taking everything down because I was packing up to go to New York. So it's quite, I was looking for one of these images of me and my sister, which again is quite poignant now looking at them.
Yeah.
And I was going through all these old black and white contact sheets that I had in a filing cabinet at the studio. And that one picture was right on the end of a roll of something else. So I must have just used up the film, because it was on film, to take that picture of my studio wall, which I'm now very glad I did with my Mac Classic in the
Yeah.
But yeah, that was
it definitely dates it.
time. Yeah, so it was it was a really kind of not magic. It was quite a powerful time. You did feel like you were kind of on top of the world, which when you think back now, we had such confidence about what we were doing that I don't really know if I would be able to summon that in quite the same way. And then this is the classic from the flat I was in that was also packing up. So that is Jonathan Monk and Dave Shigley, my flatmates, with their feet up on the black and white portable TV. This is just sheer nostalgia, but it's quite nicely dated because it's got a Windfall poster in it as well. So that again Windfall was in 1991. So again, that was like, there was these 2 schools going on. There was quite a tussle between, the Glasgow Museum's policy and what was happening within GoMA that didn't translate over to Tramway. Tramway was a very different beast. And the artists that were in the city that had been really working hard and doing a lot of ambitious exhibitions. So Windfall was when there was, whatever it was, 29 European artists. I need to see on my, we used to have a good laugh saying that the wooden beams at the side of the alcove in the kitchen were the lost beams of the Mary Rose. It's just such a great picture. It's such a good picture with that wallpaper. Yeah. Anyway, right, carry on. Yeah,
carry on.
The other one. This is the only other one I could find in me in 1996, which was when I was waitressing in New York, wearing an art T-shirt by Rod Buchanan, who made a series of these T-shirts that had everyone's genealogy, like half Scottish, half German, 1/8 German, 1/8 American. So I wore one of my last, I think it was towards the end of when I'd been working there, because nobody, when you said you weren't, I was an Irish bar, and when you said you weren't Irish, nobody could place where you were from. So, and all the chefs are from Ecuador, and it turns out that's where all good chefs come from. I remember somebody telling me that, and then I read, what was the book about the New York chef, and he confirmed it, so it is actually true. Okay, right, well, we can speed through these because these aren't really so...
that's still another one from 96.
Yes, that's me, Central Park West, smoking a cigarette.
Not sure your mum.
Yes, I know, I didn't really smoke very much, but anyway, yeah, that's in Marion Goodman's apartment. And then that was the first ever advice bar, which is quite a nice tie-in to that time as well, because that was when I made those to have as a kind of... it was this idea of kind of representing yourself in a different city. So I did feel quite liberated at that point, going away and being able to do work without anyone seeing it, anyone that I knew seeing it. because I think the peer pressure of the city at that point was quite high, you know, so that was definitely the opening up of a new strand of work that I wouldn't have made if I'd stayed in Glasgow. I think doing that class with Robert Morris was quite a, I think it's had implications for me a lot more afterwards than at the time. At the time, I found him quite scary, and I was sort of felt quite challenged by him. So, but I didn't really respond to, I didn't know much about him, probably not as much as I should have. But the way that he ran the class and the way that I saw him deal with other students, I really learned a lot about. He did once tell a student that he wouldn't critique women's clothing, and she'd worked entirely like for 2 weeks solid on this installation to be critiqued in his class, and he just went in and walked out again. It's quite totally shocking to me. It really was shocking. He'd been educated by Sam Ainsley, who was just the most incredibly supportive, powerful woman, and he just had this entirely different way of managing it. But I did learn a lot about a lot of things. So, right, moving on. So that was from these are just ones that I found from that time. So that's from my wee artist books. So we can go right through them. And the next one, that's another one of Grace Land's. Not much art in this, really. And there we are.
Yeah, but it's around social and time, and you know, you make artist books, which I know those works feature in it too. So yeah.
So they're quite important little documents from periods of my life, which I get. I like that big wall drawing. They are quite important markers of things that I've done. I haven't done one for ages, actually, so I should maybe think about doing one of them soon.
In your spare time.
Yeah.
So
and then these are my I'm so pleased with that show, Katie. I'm so glad you asked me to do it. And I think
well, it took us a long while to get it out there, because I think we first started talking in 2011, and for various reasons it took till 2016. But it's so nice to see that show again. I'd forgotten, you know, a bit where you kind of go back and you see the space again and how it looked, and just so different.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely opening up the skylights and having it as a kind of bright, open space. It was good.
Yeah,
good
completely changed it in terms of that. So yeah, they're just different works. And I suppose just in the background, there's pose work, which is again going back to the reason I stuck the Bruce McLean picture in from GoMA opening.
Yeah, I think all that ties up, and I think I've always been quite interested in Bruce McLean, because I saw him at some events in Glasgow, and I read them when I went back to read about his work when I was doing my PhD. I liked his style, and I'd worked with him a few times when I taught for a wee while at Edinburgh College of Art, and he came up to do group crits, and I just thought he had an incredible way of managing a group of students. I was so impressed by the way that he did that, because he was really, I mean, it makes out that he wasn't that experienced, but he was very, very good at dealing with this whole class of was it MFA or I can't even remember now, sculpture students. So, and that, you know, those early works are just so brilliant. But I think that idea of style and posing, that kind of really chimes with what I wanted pose work to do a wee bit, like, and those other works I made, like before I went to America, those black and white big tall portraits. Because posing in Glasgow parlance is slightly different. It's not like posing for your portrait to be painted. It's about an attitude, and it's not about staying still. It's about, you know, if you're called a poser, it means you're somebody who takes real care over what you wear and how you look, because you want people to look at you. So, which was very much Bruce McLean, and probably very much me when I was younger as well. Probably maybe me still. So I like that use of the word. That was quite a big part of making pose work for sisters, and then obviously that opportunity to portray my sister, which even now it's quite shocking, the difference. So yeah, I guess it kind of gives you I thought it was, I'm glad. I think the reading about his work and the knowing him as a personality, I think really helped me make that work. And I didn't really know what that work was going to come out like when I persuaded my sister to take the photographs and do these little video to do that day of filming with her. I kind of had an idea, but I wasn't sure how it was going to come out. So yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to Bruce McLean, that work. a lot.
I know, and I'm now regretting because I took a snap of you and Bruce McLean
Yeah,
just
I've got it. I've got
in
that.
2015. We should have put that one in. So yeah, the
That's good.
circular ways of histories and how that comes. But I'm
But
aware
you
we
know what,
probably
that circular ways of history, but also important of city public museums, city art museums that aren't just about social history, that have real art in them that people can come and see. And that's how those stories grow, because people see something. Someone at school sees a show, they then go off and write about it. You know, I saw shows not so much in Glasgow, but you know, I had Man in Armour to think about a lot when I was growing up because my dad showed us it a lot. But these little times to go and visit somewhere, you can't, if the place isn't there, you haven't got anything to go into to have to make those little experiences that you then can inform. You can't dictate what that's going to inform, but you can be sure as hell know that nothing like that will happen if the spaces aren't there. So I just think these sort of city art museums are so important to have, like a small bit of Andy Warhol, maybe a David Hockney, maybe local artists' work, difficult work. You know, it's not about doing an entire Guggenheim type display, but it is about giving opportunities to artists, like that amazing opportunity I got to do the solo show, smaller gallery shows, mixed shows. You've now got works in the collection. I just think all of these interconnected stories about New York and Glasgow and London and Bruce McLean and me and Elvis and everything are all very much tied up through city museums. And that's why you have them.
Oh, what an ending. But I was just
Yeah.
going to bring you back because I suddenly realized when you were talking about Rembrandt and Man in Armour that for the show we went and we went to
Yeah,
the
we got
Arms
the
and Armour
armour.
collection.
It's brilliant. I mean, Nits Hill is such a fabulous resource. I mean, that wasn't there when I was younger, but those trips that school kids do, that when I was in looking out the armour and you saw these school kids getting brought in, it was fantastic. So yeah, I've got a wee liking for armour. I often go back to armour, and I hadn't really connected it to my dad marching us up to see Man in Armour. So maybe it is. Maybe it is.
A wee latent thing that was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
And I'll just go through. I'll come out and we'll open it up because it'd be nice to have a bit of a conversation with people and